The losingest team in college football history just 2 years ago turned things around and won a national championship. So don't tell me that it's not possible for the Utah Utes to do the same thing in the future.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen and view of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcasts as well as on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network, and a huge shout out to our everydayers. My name is J.T. Wistrcill, credentialed media member who covers Utah athletics. Excited to be joined on today's show by Jordan Bianucci, co-host of Bryce and Bianucci weekday mornings. You can find him on ESPN, the Fan. And one thing you guys got to know as well is that today's episode is brought to you by our great friends at FanDuel. FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game day during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get on the action. You can visit FanDuel.com to get started. On today's show, we're going to talk about Utah finishing the year as a top 15 team, according to the AP. Is that fair? Talk about Devin Dampier actually playing hurt this year, and that he's already one of the top 20 favorites for the Heisman next year. But we have to start with hope, something that we all like to talk about when we're talking about our teams, the hope they'll bounce back, be better, whatever the case may be. Even a team like Utah that finished 11-2, they have hope to not just contend for Big 12 titles, to make college football playoff, and obviously some fans even would love to compete for a national championship someday. And I genuinely believe that Utah can do it. It's going to be hard. But when I look at the fact that Indiana, the worst team in the history in terms of win-loss record, the losingest team before Cignetti stepped on campus, they just won a national championship. I'm not saying year in, year out, Utah can get to a point where they're a national championship contender. But 1 year, the right mix of everything, I still believe, even in the NIL era, Jordan, it is possible for Utah to pop up and make it to a national championship game. And all it takes is getting there, and then you got a shot to win it.
Oh, absolutely. I totally agree. Because what did Indiana not have this year? A bunch of five-star right out of high school studs. They had guys from JMU. And what Cignetti likes to do is he brings in like production over potential, right? Mm-hmm. And so Utah, whether they want to go that way or they're great at developing talent, I still think they will be under Scally. They can follow that recipe a little bit. They still need the money. That's the one thing people overlook with Indiana is they have money. They got like Mark Cuban and donors to invest in it, and they have the largest living alumni base in the country. So that plays a role. But Utah can follow that blueprint in a way like that. Absolutely. I don't think it's ever been more wide open. That's not to say we're going to have, Purdue winning the national championship next year or whoever. But does Utah have a better chance now especially if there's an expanded playoff, at making a run than they did even in the Pac-12? You can make that argument. Yeah.
It feels that way. I think about things too, like you just mentioned the parity being wider. How many sports out there where the 10th seed makes a run to the college football playoff? And then it's also hard not to think then by association, okay, what could Notre Dame have maybe done based on how high they finished the year? And that's a team that didn't even make it in. So it's not just like, there's only 3 or 4 contenders in college football playoff. Of course, there will be years where that's the case, but it does feel like it's more spread out. And you make a great point too on NIL, right? Because Indiana, and they do have some NIL, right? I mean, Cignetti tried to say, like, we're not one of the top dogs. Fair, but you did purchase the Heisman. Maybe purchase is a mean word. You did bring in the Heisman Trophy winner, who was pretty dang good and sought after by a lot of teams this past season, right? So I look at what they were able to do with that and say, hey, maybe Utah can't bring in the top NIL QB, but what you said is true. Utah, maybe if they don't land the 4 and 5 stars, well, they've been beating Oregon and USC back in those Pac-12 days without landing those guys. And Morgan Scalley was a huge part of those recruiting efforts. So if you can just hit on that right mix of talent, find the guys that are being overlooked by the rest of the country. A couple years ago, it was John Henry Daly, transfers from BYU to Utah, hadn't done anything with the Cougars. And there's lots of guys. Devin Dampier, after the season he had last year, right? He was Big 12 newcomer of the year. Those are guys that some people want him, but not everyone is looking for. Those guys are out there. You can still build your roster with those guys and have a chance to win it all, even if you're not landing 5-star talent galore.
And this isn't an Indiana team that, it wasn't like Miami that kind of snuck in, didn't even win their conference. This was an Indiana team that dominated they went 16-0.
It's crazy.
They beat Ohio State. They beat Oregon twice. This was not a 12 seed in the basketball tournament making a run to the Sweet 16. This was a dominant team, one of the greatest we've ever seen. So yeah, can Utah build with a similar model? Absolutely. And they play in a conference where you could, I don't know if it's easier to get into the college football playoff. I wouldn't say that, but the road there, as far as strength of schedule, next to like playing Ohio State and Oregon every year, it is a little easier.
It's by far easier. I mean, before we even jumped on. By the time you guys are listening to this, the Big 12 schedule may have dropped. We'll be talking about that on this show tomorrow. Look at Utah's schedule for next year. Look at, I don't know, Penn State's schedule for next year. I mean, oh my gosh, whose schedule would you rather have just on paper right now? That's the advantage that Utah's afforded. Tech is probably one of these, maybe not the safest, but probably up there for safe bets to make the college football playoff next year and I'm not the biggest Sorsby fan, but I still think he's good. And I think that roster is going to be really good again with the NIL resources they have. So it is an easier path in the Big 12. And that's another opportunity that Utah is afforded. So I do absolutely believe with the right coaching, the right players, you develop the right talent, just like Utah broke through in the Pac-12. I think they can break through in this current college football landscape. It won't be easy because, like we also just talked about, you're not a top NIL school for Utah. So as was the case with this year, John Henry Daly, Smith Snowden, these guys end up at Michigan now, right? You're not going to be able to retain your talent year over year. But if you can get that special mix in there 1 year, also Utah trying to bring in private equity too, right? So hopefully you can retain at a little bit of a better level. Just that 1 year, that's what we're trying to figure out. And I do believe Utah is one of those schools where I look at their track record for success. I do believe they still have the right guy at head coach. I'm a big Morgan Scalley fan. I still think there's a world this team could get to a point where they have their crazy run to the national championship, riding a dominant regular season if they hit on the right talent development.
Yeah, especially if they go to a 16 or a 24-team playoff, they would be in this year. Yes. And they could make a run. You can go 10-2 and still get in. And with Utah, I'm assuming they'll retain their style of play, which travels, which is great D-line play, great defense, and a really good offensive line. We'll see, because coaches have taken off for Michigan. But that's a style to me that can win in the playoff against better skill position teams, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does. And the other thing too, a reminder, I feel like the SEC and the Big Ten try to make it about, hey, it's just a different level of football here. These other conferences, the other teams aren't like us. Well, I saw Miami lose to SMU and Louisville. It took me a second to forget. Louisville. And they went on to play in the national championship game, and they gave Indiana a better game than Ohio State, Alabama, some of these other, just Oregon twice did, basically. It's crazy. So that's where I also feel like the disparity is not as crazy. I don't know if the end of the year version of Utah, because they were banged up, I don't know how they would have fared in the CFP. The run defense got to be a problem. But healthy Utah with their top guys playing, their offensive linemen, everything, I absolutely think they would have made it a game against some of these CFP teams, Jordan.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like you said, I'm not saying Utah is going to win 3 national championships in a row, but when the stars align for that 1 year, every once in a while, they can make a run. Or absolutely. They've shown that they can in the past. If you took those teams that went to the Rose Bowl, and I know they didn't win the Rose Bowl, but they could have had a couple wins in an expanded CFP. So it's a crazy time, and I don't love everything, but it's also a really fun time to be a college football fan and a Utah fan.
It is, because there's hope that you can make these things happen. And if Utah wants to make anything happen next season, it's going to be with Devin Dampier. And Devin Dampier had a really good season. Maybe in some ways wasn't quite the heights we thought it could be. And there's a reason that just got revealed why that was the case. This episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our great friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. The college football playoff is here, and the college football playoff has an offer for you with FanDuel. It's giving all customers even more ways to get in on the action every single game day of the playoffs, because right now, every college football playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost waiting for them in the app. And yes, college football may have passed us by now, but what else is there? There's college basketball, there's the NFL, playoffs still rolling on, there's the NBA too. FanDuel has you covered. The profit boost is there and bets you. And if you feel good about a best, why not add a profit boost? Ride with your favorites when you think your team is controlling the matchup. Then apply the profit boost and even go bigger winnings then. When you win, FanDuel pays out instantly, which is perfect for playoff football. FanDuel is the best place to get in on the action all playoff long. So visit FanDuel.com to get your college football playoff profit boost every single game day. You can head over to FanDuel Sportsbook today. Once again, thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen and view of the day. Want to remind you guys, our Everydayer Club is live. You can join the Locked On Utes Everydayer Club. And what do you get? Well, you get an ad-free version of this podcast, as well as entering a Discord chat with me and other Locked On hosts. You can head over to lockedonutes.supercast.com. We're going to start doing Q&As on there that'll be answered live on this show. Excited to hear from you guys and see you in our Everydayer chat. Information in the episode description in YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Jordan Bianucci back with me here. Jordan, Devin Dampier was battling injuries for most of the season, and that was clear. You just look at the way he was running early in the season versus a BYU, a Tech. Something's not right. Even by the time we got the bowl game against Nebraska, he had that month off. He looked healthier, looked faster, looked quicker, all those things the case. Well, it's been reported by Jason Bacco, of the Salt Lake Tribune that Dampier had surgery earlier this month to repair a sports hernia. And this is back in December, this is reported, that he suffered during the third week of the season. That was against Wyoming when Utah's offense really struggled there. For Devin Dampier to have the season he's still at, Big 12 Newcomer of the Year, over 25-plus touchdowns, only 5 picks, led this Utah team to an 11-2 record, all on a sports hernia, makes me even more excited about what he could be capable of next year, Jordan.
Absolutely. I mean, the key to week 3, that was before conference play started, anything. That's not a little injury. That's not like didn't tweak an ankle. That's difficult. So absolutely, if he can stay healthy and improve the passing game downfield, I really like what he can do. And you mentioned, he's a Heisman hopeful, long odds, but the fact that he's on that list does tell me something.
It absolutely does. And you mentioned the Heisman odds. Josh Furlong put out there that the Heisman odds for way too early for 2026 have been released. Of course, Arch Manning's at the very top. And you got to scroll down the list a little bit, but you do find good old Devin Dampier inside the top 20. And I think some people think that's crazy. But when you think about the type of season that Dampier had this year, and you also factor in the injury, it's not that crazy. Entering this year, last year for Utah, he joined an exclusive list of players at New Mexico who threw over 2,500 yards in a season and rushed for 1,000 yards. We didn't think he'd do exactly that at Utah, but at the same time, had he been fully healthy and also had the chance to play in one extra regular season game, he would have played Colorado. We know his stats would have been massive in that one with how the bus were formed, and had a shot in the Big 12 title game. He might have been not too far off those numbers, threw for nearly 2,500 yards, and that's including the bowl game now. But given those extra games, and if we include some of the bowl games as well, he could have been a 3,000 yards passer, and he was 835 rushing yards from the ground, nearly 1,000 yards rusher. If he has those type of stats in the regular season next year, and if he's fully healthy, he could get very close to those. Who's to say he can't be in New York next year, especially if he's leading a Utah team that by the time this comes out, we should see their schedule isn't loaded with juggernauts, has a CFP type of run. I don't know if he'll land in New York. My prediction this year was he'd land in the top 10 of the Heisman. Jordan, I might not learn my lesson. I might make it again with the healthy Devin Dampier coming back next year.
Yeah, I mean, and we haven't seen the actual schedule, but we know the opponents, yes. And there aren't a ton of really scary defenses on that schedule. There are a couple, there are a few, but no, it's the qualifier in football, right? If he's healthy, he can do a lot. We'll see how he meshes with Kevin McGivern. I'm interested to see that. But yeah, I mean, and I think it's huge having Wayshawn Parker come back. I was watching that because I know they have to patch the offensive line, but that takes a load off him. And also Burt Ficklin coming back, I think is big. So I think he is poised to have a big year out there. I know we won't get into the schedule, but I like the outlook for him in the Utes.
I feel the same way. And one thing that he's going to do next year, probably, unfortunately, is take more hits in the pocket. So what I want Devin's adjustment to be, Jordan, is him to run less between the tackles. That's Kevin McGivern as well, too. I felt like that was one area where he was taking an extra beating on his body. Is that why he got hurt? I don't know that for sure, that this is the exact play he got hurt on. But I know if you're hurt and you're running between the tackles, and Devin Dampier is not even 6 foot. So he is just taking a beating on the inside there, is not a bigger guy going against 300-plus pound defensive linemen. I think an adjustment I'd like to see for Utah next year is run him less between the tackles. He can still scramble. You can still use him in certain quarterback design runs, but really be on him about not calling those design quarterback runs. And when he does scramble, Devin, just slide. Live to fight another day. We cannot risk you getting banged up because quarterback health, this was week 3 we just mentioned too. So had Devin been healthy, maybe Utah stands a chance in some of those other games. Probably still lose to Tech, but part of the reason the offense was so bad was Devin clearly wasn't healthy. So who knows? Could have been a different season had Devin been healthier, right, Jordan?
It takes a toll. It just does. And it takes one hit. That's why I always get down. And I lighten the load. I don't need him taking shots from defensive linemen and linebackers constantly. I'm totally with you. And we didn't even realize how hurt he was.
Yeah.
And I remember watching games and thinking, like, I get why you're running in between the tackles, but why so much?
Yes.
That was kind of one of the frustrating things for me watching this season. So no, I'm totally with you. It's funny. He is so athletic and so strong. It's deceiving because when like you cover him in person, you mentioned it. He is not a big guy. It just shows you how talented he really is.
He is an incredible talent. And you mentioned he is strong for his size. Just a matter of when a 300-pound defensive lineman lands on you time and time again, it's going to wear down over time. So I'm really excited for him. And Jordan, by the time a lot of people are listening to this, the Big 12 schedule will have dropped. And I think we feel the same way, just as we stand here right now before the Big 12 schedule drops. We have the list of opponents. It's not that intimidating of a group. Utah sees Arkansas this year. Arkansas to come to us. That's a first-year Razorbacks program. And I'm also old enough to remember, Jordan, the last time an SEC team came out to Salt Lake City did not go so well for the good old Florida Gators. How about this year? I'm looking at a Houston team, which is probably the second best team on Utah's schedule, with BYU, I think, being the top one. I think as much as I just Locked On Utes, but we can give the Cougars their flowers and say it's a really talented roster they've put together. Houston's probably the second most talented team. Even last year, they lost to the West Virginia in a disappointing game. They did not have outstanding wins. I know they got beat LSU in a bowl game. That was an LSU team that's a shell of itself. I just am not really scared by a lot of the teams on Utah's schedule. There's always wild cards throughout the college football season. That happens, especially in the NIL era, because so many of these teams, we don't know how the quarterback they brought in, how all this stuff is going to pan out. But with a healthy Devin Dampier, some key skill position talented players back too, and some really strong coaching from Morgan Scalley, hopefully a couple of portal guys hit, this could be a really good Utah team that has a chance at 10 wins once again.
Absolutely. If I would have looked at that schedule a month and a half, 2 months ago and seen an Iowa State team, I'd been, okay, that'll be tough. Well, Matt Campbell's gone. So and they have BYU, I think, is the toughest team on that schedule conference. Well, after Tech, I should say.
Yeah.
BYU is going to be good. But they come up to Salt Lake. You have them at home. So it's very doable. Now, TCU, they've lost their quarterback. Now, I was on the radio this morning. I'm talking to Bryce Larson, and Bryce did jump in on me and goes, look, you're right now, but in next October, November, there's going to be some team in there that's way better than we thought they were. Mm-hmm. And some team in there that we thought was going to be great, and they're going to be at 500. That does seem like a trend right now in the Big 12.
Massive one. Well, and especially this year, it was kind of the latter of what you said, right? Because I remember sitting there trying to predict Utah's schedule before the season, and I'm staring at Kansas, Kansas State, and Baylor. And I'm just like, I don't see how Utah wins 3 of those games in a row. And all 3 of those teams were absolutely disappointing, and Utah won those 3 games in a row. Now, we didn't at the time also thought, like, can BYU really beat Utah again? And the answer to that was yeah. BYU was a surprise because we didn't expect it to be as smooth and as seamless of a transition as it ends up being. But you're right. There's going to be some surprises on the schedule, but maybe Utah can be a surprise. I feel like Utah's roster got worse from last year as we stand here today, but development from Dampier and still some strong coaching on the defensive side of the ball. And I should just say, not even development, healthy Dampier, combined with a middling schedule, could take what on paper looks like an 8-4 roster into a 10-2 team. And then, Jordan, we talked about in the first segment a little bit, CFP for the Utah Utes, and just getting the dance, and anything can happen, right?
Yeah, give yourself a shot. It'll also be interesting to see what the expectations are too, because the last 2 years, Utah has come in with the spotlight on them. Mm-hmm. That first year in the Big 12 and then last year. And they were the team to beat. Because even if it's hard to remember this, but early on in the year, we knew Texas Tech was good. Albeit none of us, I don't know about you, I was not picking Texas Tech to come into Salt Lake and win that game against Utah. I thought Utah, some people did, but Texas Tech proved to be much better than I thought they were. That was a great, I should say, defense. That was a great defense. But so next year, Texas Tech will have all the attention. And then I think BYU will have a lot of attention because they've retained so many guys on that squad. Utah may be able to, I don't know, maybe you have a different opinion on this. Will Utah be able to sneak under the radar a little bit next year?
I think in some ways, yes. I think anytime you bring your quarterback back, that gets a little tougher, but also the whole Kyle Whittingham to Michigan thing. I think there's going to be extra eyeballs on the Wolverines, obviously, now because of that. And I totally agree. BYU and Tech have to be the favorites. And I should go back to what you said. I actually did pick Utah to beat Tech, but I thought Tech was capable of coming in because I did think that roster was as talented as it was. So it'll be interesting to see who those surprise teams are. And you mentioned kind of the expectations. Like, to me, as I sit here right now, I think Utah, because of the schedule, is very capable of going 10-2 again. If they went 8-4 or 9-3, I don't know how disappointing I would feel that is based on how the rest of the Big 12 plays out. Obviously, you can have bad losses and then it becomes disappointing, but this year's Utah season was not disappointing. They didn't reach their goals, but they were right on the cusp of reaching those goals too, as we mentioned. So to me, if Utah's 8-4 with what they lost, a new first-year head coach, even if things are going to be similar, that's not a massive disappointment. But we both know the fan base probably won't feel that way, right, Jordan?
No, exactly. If you're a fan, though, you really do have to step back. If they go 8-4 after what they lost in coaching and in guys in the portal, that's a tremendous accomplishment. That's impressive. I mean, when you lose what they lost, and they brought in some good players, but just the turnover alone, that's like a 7. You're thinking like, oh well, they're 7-5, 6-6, first year under a new coach. If they go 8-4 and they're playing Texas Tech and BYU on that, I'm impressed by that. I think we have to kind of step back and realistically look at it this year. A 10-2 would be that would be unbelievable. That would be phenomenal. But I do think that potential is there because you are bringing back Dampier.
Everyone loves to say games are won and lost in the trenches, right, Jordan? Mm-hmm. Do you know how much trench starters Utah brings back next year? We're going to go 9 starters in the trenches.
How many?
0. None of the starters return for this team. All 5 offensive linemen gone. All 4 starting defensive linemen gone. Now we say, well, some guys got some playtime in the ballgame. That's true. They did. They weren't the starters. If you were to say to me how many of Utah's 10 best players last year, they came back, I think I'd say 2. I'd go Wayshawn and I'd go Devin. And I like Burt Vicklin. He's fun and exciting. Wasn't one of the 10 best players on this team. But it's going to be other guys that pop up and emerge. But this Utah team was immensely talented. In fact, the AP said they were one of the top 15 teams in college football. Were they right? I absolutely think the answer is yes to that, Jordan. I do think this is one of the top 15 teams in college football. If you want to say to me by the time we got to the end of the season, I think this USC team, this Michigan team could have come in and beaten Utah, I can hear your argument because of how bad the Utah run defense was. But at the same time, we saw how good a healthy Utah team throttled Nebraska in that bowl game, even down some of those key guys too. I think Utah pretty clearly proved they were a top 15 team in the country with a top 3 offensive line, in my opinion, with a very exciting quarterback, a pass game that did just enough each week, basically, and a Utah defense that had their run defense issues, but the pass rush was relentless thanks to John Henry Daly and some elite cornerback play as well to have to play in man-to-man coverage, basically on the island all over the place. I think this was a top 15 Utah team. What do you see it as?
I know. I absolutely agree. I think we're in this era of college football where now if you don't make the playoff, somehow you didn't have a great year. That's the narrative. And it's not true. Utah went 10-2. That's an incredible year. And so absolutely, they're a top 15 team. And I think we look at it and we're like, well, it's the end of the year. Does that matter? I think it does, for better or worse for college football. I think that plays into next year, into whether it's the AP voters, CFP, they see that finish. That does, I don't know how much, but I think it does play a factor, and I think it does matter.
We've hinted at this a couple times now, and we'll get back to, Utah top 15. Where exactly should they be ranked? Maybe the fan perspective right now of if we don't make the college football playoff this season is a wash, a waste, a failure. I just think it's so ridiculous in some ways. Like, granted, yes, did you not meet your goals? I get that. But then the solution seems so frequently fan base is feeling, boom, reset, restart. Sometimes when you're a lot closer to the top, it's better to run it back than just tear the whole thing down. I think Penn State's about to find that out. Before the whole Sharon Moore thing happened, I think people forget Michigan fans were kind of like not feeling Sharon Moore. Like, I don't think he's the guy. A reminder, it's been 2 years since they won the title. They had a down year the year before. They were a win against Ohio State away, and they only lost to top 20 teams from being in the college football playoff. And everyone's kind of Michigan fans kind of like, make or break here for Sharon Moore. What? He's Before everything happened, he had them on the cusp of the playoff, and people are like, disappointment. And, another one's like USC fans. I feel like USC was disappointed they didn't make the playoff. And I understand being disappointed, but was the season a failure? No, it feels like you got this program going back in the right direction. You beat a Michigan team who I think is really good. You were a 9-3 roster. You lost to a Notre Dame team who was pretty clearly the best team left out. Like, this notion that if we don't make the playoff, like, it's a massive failure and everyone should just be fired and then we'll have a reset. It's just a false notion. And even you see teams get in the playoff and they lose, Alabama fans like, oh, fire Kalen DeBoer. Kalen DeBoer is a fantastic head coach. It's just funny what's going on right now in this sport. Just because the postseason field got expanded, that means everyone else, even if what other seasons would have been successes, are now failures. I totally disagree with the logic.
Yeah, and some of this, we're relying on a committee of other people to tell us how good these teams are. So all of a sudden, Mario Cristobal's a genius because he made a run in the CFP, whereas they could have been left out and Notre Dame could have gotten in. And then, I just go back to try to step out and think Utah went 10-2 in a power conference. They lost to Texas Tech that had one of the greatest defenses I've seen in a lot. That was a great defense. And then a really good BYU team, not as good as we thought. I think they were maybe going into that Big 12 championship game, but good. You got to give them credit.
Oh, absolutely.
And Utes are in both those games, are really in it on the road at BYU. Could have won that game. Should have won that game.
Yeah.
So yes, it was not a good year. It was a great year for Utah football. It's just unfortunate that one Big 12 team got in. You went 10-2.
You mentioned the committee thing is so true. How close are we, instead of Mario Cristobal probably signing an extension somehow here soon with Miami? He's probably on the hot seat going into next season for missing the playoffs yet again. And because a subjective committee decided, hey, you do deserve to be in late, and they flipped it. They did the right thing, in my opinion. Now his job is feeling very safe and secure. So it just shows you the crazy nature of the sport. Also, really quick, we've talked about the BYU game so many times on this show. Jordan, I cannot wait to see Michigan fans' reaction when Kyle Whittingham goes forward on like 4th and 7 against Ohio State in that game and throws to like the wide receiver who's just had a rough year. Like, I cannot wait to see that reaction. Kyle will be like, well, if you think you're smarter than the analytics, like, that'll go over great with the Wolverines fans in the media, right, Jordan?
Oh, absolutely. They're not going to question that at all. That's one of the things I can't wait to see with Kyle in Michigan, is just the media interaction and the fans. You mentioned the fans, because it is a different level back there, just like the scrutiny. Yeah. So yes, 4th and 7, when you could take points in a rivalry game, that will absolutely go over well. I'll stay off Twitter, JT. I'll just stay off Twitter.
I'll be on it like a madman watching all the reactions. I'll say that's for sure. And one thing too, I think people forget, and we'll talk about this Utah team in a moment here. Kyle Whittingham built Utah. The reason that we've been to media scrums before, the reason there's so many reporters there, is because of the success that Kyle Whittingham has had for Utah. Nothing that Kyle Whittingham has done has propelled Michigan to being what Michigan is. He built Utah. He walks into what is already this massive battleship and this high operation, the Michigan Wolverines. He is not bigger than that program there. He was at Utah in many ways because of what he did. I'm very curious to see how he handles that. But really quick, back to this this ranking that Utah has. I do feel like this is a fair spot for Utah to be in. Could I make the argument that, hey, Utah, if they had gotten BYU in a neutral site, they might have beat them. Utah could have maybe beat Texas. Utah beat Oklahoma. But at the same time, I think it's totally fair. Like, honestly, if Vanderbilt fans were like, we should be above Utah with how they close the season, I actually might even have that flip too and have Vandy above Utah. But I feel like this team does firmly belong in the top 15 for what they were able to do. I feel like there is a clear drop off when we get to the Virginias of the world, when we get to the Iowas, the Tulane's the next one there, USC and Michigan. I feel like there was a clear top 15 in the sport, and I feel like the Utah Utes deserve to be in that, and I think they're ranked where they should be.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of hard because we have recency bias where it's the last few games of the season we saw that injury plagued team and just their inability, like you said, to just stop the run, which we could go into that. But no, overall, their body of work this year, 15 seems just about right to me.
It does. And this is a Utah team that, like we said, the fan expectation will be even better next year. We'll see if Morgan Scalley and co can beat it. Jordan, always a blast having you on, man. Please let everyone know where they can find more of your work at.
You can listen to our show, Bryce and Bianucci, 7 to 10 a.m. right here in Utah on ESPN The Fan, 103.9, 98.3 FM. Thanks for having me, JT.
Appreciate you, Jordan. That's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Utes. We'll be back with you tomorrow. Talk about the latest in Utah athletics, which includes a Big 12 schedule drop. We'll see you then.